over 20 years, Clinic's Health Group has provided world-class healthcare to underserviced communities. With every new facility we open, quality, affordability, and excellence is what we've become synonymous with. To that end, Cullinan Wellness Hospital is the latest addition to the group and the third in our growing roster of psychiatric care services. Located in Cullinan, east of Pretoria, our state-of-the-art facility is perfectly suited to service patients as far as Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and the Northwest Province in a tranquil setting surrounded by a luscious garden. For over 20 years, Clinic's Health Group has provided world-class healthcare.
We have such facilities in our communities because previously we've ignored the psychological instability. We thought we can go on with stress or depression, and because now that we have come out as psychiatric faculty to say we can offer this kind of care, treatment and rehabilitation for people who are in need of, who needs to heal emotionally or psychologically. So these kind of facilities are important to be. I would wish that every area would have this kind of wellness facilities.
I think mental health institutions and wellness centers such as this one are important mainly because we live a very rat race type of life and struggle to see when we are truly struggling with life. And being able to come into a facility like this allows one to pause and acknowledge whatever is happening in your life that is bringing you down, pause and regain function, pause and get back onto your feet in a way that you didn't even realize you needed. There's the need to have an out of your comfort zone area that will move and shake you as much as possible to get you back into a better state of you.
No matter the treatment or duration of stay at Cullinan Wellness Hospital, our patients and their loved ones can rest assured that they will be taken care of and watched over by our team of experienced mental health nurses, psychiatrists, and clinical psychologists.
Most of the patients that we admit are voluntary patients and they come on their own. The diagnosis that we normally work around is that patients with bipolar mood disorder, major depressive disorders, as well as post-traumatic stress disorders. Some has personality disorders such as gambling.
Our hospital provides private psychiatric services that aim to help the individual experience the fullness of life. We cater for a wide range of patients, including those with depression, bipolar, post-traumatic stress disorders, anxiety disorders, sleeping difficulties, neurocognitive disorders, dementia, and psychiatric conditions, amongst others.
My approach is I use what we call cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. So basically it's helping, because most of the time I've noticed that we tend to be depressed or go into mental problems because of the channeling of our thoughts. We tend to think, if you are going through a difficult situation, you tend to think more negative about it than thinking positive about it and actually getting a solution. So I just help my patients to come up with solutions, and hence I use solution-focused therapy, because I'm confident that they do have solutions. It's just that sometimes they're not confident to put them into action.
My approach when treating a patient goes back to the good old Batupele principles. We follow a very client-centered approach. Every case is different, and so applying Batupele principles where it's about the patient, it's about dignity, it's about ensuring that the patient's needs are met, is at the core of practice, is at the core of all intervention.
As mental health practitioners, We encourage individuals to visit our facility so we can assist them in finding routine solutions to the problems they face on a day-to-day basis.
I think from a very simple point of a non-functional mind is a non-functional human, and neglecting mental health means, in essence, neglecting a whole part of yourself that is very necessary to maintain function on a day-to-day. The more we ignore the brain and the psychology and the emotions of a person, as we have been, the more we are likely to not reach to the full potential that we could.
At Clinics Cullinan Wellness Hospital, we believe mental health is the cornerstone to helping you find and lead a happy, balanced life. Visit our magnificent facility at Hospital Road, Cullinan, Pretoria East. We're open 7 days a week and are ready to receive you.
Well, thank you very much, Kamo, for that short video clip on Cullinan, one of our wellness facilities situated in Pretoria, as you've just heard. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you once more, colleagues, to the clinic's weekly webinars that we host every Thursday evening between 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. And we've been having these webinars for the last 2.5 years or so, since 2020, when we all had to acclimatize to a new way of doing things, and virtual meetings have come to become our mainstay of communication and educating the medical fraternity. And we are glad that you support in this platform that we started way back in 2020. And this evening, we're excited to be having one of the speakers who's going to be speaking us on mental health and wellness issues. And as we celebrate that Mental Awareness Day, World Health Mental Day, on the 10th of October this year, because this is a date that celebrates Mental Health Day every year, according to the World Health Organization. And also this year, the World Federation of Mental Health has come up with a theme which says, make mental health and well-being for all a global priority. And we are glad that you are able to dedicate this whole month of October to mental health awareness. This being a CPD accredited webinar, we request that you give us your full details as to your registration with whatever regulatory body you are with, either the HPCSA, Nursing College of Pharmacy Council, so that we then submit your details. We also implore you to stay until the end of the presentation so that you get full CPD points once we end this webinar. And note that these webinars are also streamed live on YouTube, and so you may be able to obtain a full recording of this webinar by at the end of this presentation early tomorrow morning, so that you can always review what was being discussed. And please also do like us on YouTube, so that you get reminders of all the webinars that we are hosting here at clinics on every Thursday. And so this, and also remember also that you should remember to mute yourselves as you log in, and also switch off your videos so as to enhance the quality of the presentation and reception that we're getting and feedback. And so this evening, as I indicated, we are having Dr. Mvuyiso Talatala, who's a psychiatrist and head of department, recently appointed as the head of Department of Psychiatry at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, and is also a practicing psychiatrist at clinics Dr. S.K. Matsek Memorial Hospital, and also Solomon Sticks Morewa Hospital based in Joburg, CBD. And Dr. Talatala is very passionate about mental health. At medical school, I see that we wrote they made a mistake as a mental school. Actually, it's at medical school. He took an interest in psychiatry during visits to psychiatric acute wards, and Dr. Talatala became a doctor and a qualified as a specialist in psychiatry in 2003. He worked at King George Hospital in 2004 before moving to Johannesburg in 2005, where he also works in sessions at Psychiatric Hospital, where I met him in 2013 to 2016. He then stepped in as the president of the South African Society of Psychiatrists. And I think it was during that time, remember that when we had this life as a dementia saga, that was in the forefront of standing up for the patients. So this evening, he's going to be speaking on ethics of psychiatric admissions, and we're glad to have you, Dr. Talatala, in our midst. Thank you, and it's not the first time that you grace this platform, so we're excited to have you once more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pila. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. Definitely, it's not the first time we've done this since 2020. I'm actually impressed that it's still holding. I've been since 2020. I thought after COVID it would disappear. So I'm impressed that we still are here. I've chosen this topic that we explore this topic on ethics of psychiatric hospital admissions. I know that it's a variety of people who are here, so I may have to go into details about explaining some of the things, but definitely a psychiatric admission is different from admissions for other medical conditions. I mean, the biggest one, even before I start talking, is the fact that it is regulated by the Mental Health Care Act. We are having a load shedding, and I've been resisting to find alternative to load shedding since 2007. I've been hopeful, and since I'm a permanent optimist, that will be one day will be out of load shedding. So that is why you see one side of my face as light. I'm using a lamp, and the other side is darker. But the internet is holding, so I think we will not have huge problems. Just trying to get my slide to move.
Doc, maybe
Yes.
if you can click on it and then try moving again.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right. As Dr. Pila has already mentioned, it's the Mental Health Awareness Month this month, and we are not speaking to the theme, which is making mental health a global priority. But if I can get healthcare workers to understand the process that we follow and the challenges that we face, as well as the ethical issues around hospital admission of psychiatric patients, I think I'll be contributing a bit to the theme of the Mental Health Awareness Month. I mean, I'm not going to. I know some of you may be expecting me to talk about the challenges of finding a psychiatrist to see a patient. No, I'm not going to talk about that. Challenges of finding a psychiatric bed, that's another story for another day. We're not going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about the actual ethics, how the admission affects the patient ethically and the treating doctor. And I'm mentioning it and in the right month because there are various sources of stigma in psychiatry. One is psychiatric diagnosis and treatment itself, but the second one is the hospital admission on its own. I mean, being admitted in a psychiatric hospital at Stegfontein, it comes with a lot of stigma. One, to within your community, within your family, but even those who are employed, even to the employer, there must be a lot of stigmatization that goes around. I mean, a lot of times I get asked, declare this person incapable of making their own decisions following a psychiatric hospital admission, which is not a straightforward thing, but people would sometimes push for that. Families, employers think that once you've been to a psychiatric hospital, maybe you can't think. But in addition to these few issues I've mentioned, on itself, it is a complex ethical problem, the psychiatric hospital admission. And the one that is even most controversial is when you get admitted as an involuntary mental health care user. What used to be said back in the days in the old Mental Health Care Act, when you get certified for involuntary care, it gets even more controversial ethically, because strictly speaking, what philosophers would refer to it, they will say it's coercive treatment. You are forcing the person to go and obtain treatment, which does not happen in other disciplines. There's no other discipline where you get forced to take treatment against your own wishes or without your own consent. In fact, here you get forced even when you're objecting to the treatment. If you've got a gangrene that is to be removed, and you don't want the gangrene to be removed, no one will force you to have it removed. But if you've got schizophrenia, you could be forced. Well, you're going to say, I want to talk about ethics. What ethics am I talking about? Complicated things. You are still struggling to deal with the fact that the ministers are not paying for their own electricity. And not only they are not paying for it, they are getting it all the time. And I'm relying on a lamp here. And you may say, maybe I should be spending more time dealing with that. Or those who watch Formula One, you could be saying, hey, what should happen to Max Verstappen? Is it fair that Red Bull spent so much money to get their car better? And that's how they won. It was not because they were so competent. You may argue, may put that argument. Should we not spend more time on ethics in sport? What about Leclerc that day? I mean, it was number 2, almost about to win, but was being chased very hard by the other Red Bull, Perez. And instead of keeping up, he decided to cut the corners. And should we not focus on those people? No, we are healthcare workers. We're going to go back to our business. And the business of today is for us to look at the ethics of psychiatric admissions. Before we go to the ethics, I need to explain the types of admissions one has to go through. Those who are not in psychiatry may wonder, why do I do that? Because all other admissions, other types of medicine, they're all the same. They've got the same legal status, really. But in psychiatry, we divide them into 3: voluntary, assisted, and involuntary mental health care admissions. The voluntary one is where the person goes voluntarily to hospital. I think in the video in Kalinen, they actually said they admit voluntary patients. You can be admitted by a psychiatrist or referred by a GP or by a psychologist. You consent to the admission you want to. You can only sign yourself out because you do need that. You see that you need admission. Most times this will be for depression, bipolar disorder, sometimes schizophrenia, what is not too acute. Then the second one is the assisted admissions. The assisted admissions are for those people like with dementia, for instance, as an example. They are not objecting to the hospital admission, but they have no capacity to say, I want it or I don't want it, but they're not opposing to it. So they could be admitted as assisted mental health care user. Then the third category, these are according to the Mental Health Care Act. Third category is the involuntary mental health care user. These ones will be people who've got a mental illness, who are at risk to themselves or others or property, and they're objecting to the hospital admission. And everyone around them, the family, the doctors, believe that they should get treatment so that they could be better and pose less risk to themselves and others. By the way, you can also get in involuntary, even with depression. For instance, if you've got suicidal ideation and you plan to kill yourself, or you've even attempted, and you are refusing to cooperate with treatment, so you could be admitted as an involuntary mental health care user. The voluntary mental health care user, I have to pay for my supper and for anything that clinics may do for me. I have to tell you where they admit. For voluntary mental care users, those are the facilities that admit to the SK Matsige, where I work, September Hospital, Naledi, Solomon Sticks Memorial Hospital, Kalinen, which advertise themselves in the video. But there's other facilities in private and public throughout the country that admit voluntary mental health care users. In the public sector, it's a bit of a pressure for beds, so you may not easily get a bed for voluntary mental health care, because there's quite a huge number of people who need assisted care and involuntary care, and the resources are limited. As I've already mentioned, assisted mental health care users are those with limited capacity. Then the third one, which I think we'll spend a lot of time today, is those ones with involuntary mental health care. The process of admitting these ones, and I think it's important that I explain even to non-psychiatrists, because I know I work in a general hospital, and once someone is picked up there to the SK Matsige in the medical ward that they are behaviorally disturbed, quickly the doctors want the person to be moved to the psychiatric ward there to SK Matsige, or quickly the person must be moved to Steekfontein or Portview or whichever facility cares for mental health care. But there is a process that is prescribed in law, and it's done even better in the public sector, that if one has got mental illness and they're behaviorally disturbed and you're going to admit them against their will, they have to go through a 72-hour process. So 2 doctors will assess them before the 2 healthcare workers before the 72-hour observation, and then they get observed, blood tests get done. Then after 72 hours, they get reassessed. If they still need further mental health care, then they meet involuntary mental health care users, and then they get transferred to a facility that has capacity to look after involuntary mental health care users. I'm just going to explain the legalities here because that's what we're going to deal with, especially from an ethical point of view. After then, all that documentation that was done in the 72 observation and the transfer gets sent to a review board. Each province has got review boards that review this, and that has been done within 10 days. And then the review board will assess, and then within a month, they'll provide a response whether it's okay, the person can continue as an involuntary mental health care user, or the person must be discharged. Once the review board has done that, they move the paperwork to the High Court. And the High Court also has about a month to also make up its mind whether they agree with that admission or not. This is going to come in handy towards the end of my talk, even though I will repeat it at that stage. So the ethical question that we all have to then deal with is whether is it morally permissible for us to let patients go through this forced admission? Is it something acceptable? I know doctors will quickly say it's easily acceptable, but there are objections, and I'm going to show you how it has been objected. So that is why, when I'm in the medical ward, I shouldn't be rushed about setting the patient for involuntary mental health care, because it's a controversial area and people are objecting to it. I'm going to give you my response up front before I justify it, and say that to me it is important that if including myself, if I were to be so ill, I pose a risk to myself or others, I should be admitted against my will, even though at the beginning it appears like it's affecting my autonomy. But once I'm treated, I'll recover and I'll acquire more autonomy to make, especially for future decisions. If I am not treated, then I may lose a lot of autonomy outside the hospital on other issues. So in that sense, therefore, I argue that this forced treatment, this involuntary treatment, is actually acceptable and morally permissible. And I'm hoping that I'll convince clinics to open a few beds there at Solomon Sticks Morewa Memorial Hospital for involuntary care. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Solomon Sticks Morewa Memorial Hospital, also in Johannesburg, they've got beds for voluntary care. They do have a license for assisted care, and they look after my former life estimate patients, over 400 of them. But I'm persuading them they could still open a few beds for involuntary mental health care. We are desperate for those kinds of beds. Before I go further arguing this, why I think it's acceptable, do understand that I'm going to offer arguments, not necessarily answers. So I still have to go and think about the answers. And I've already stated this, and I want to emphasize it. Coercive treatment, even though I'll use that term, that is equal to involuntary mental health care in the South African law. The coercive treatment term is a philosophical term, and today we're discussing ethics, not law, so we'll tend to use coercive treatment. And I do want us to orient ourselves, because I want us to understand why it's important for doctors to understand these intricacies of these arguments. Right now, we are guided by law, but above law, there's our bioethics. For instance, we need to practice medicine within our codes. But above that, issues started with moral arguments. For instance, when it comes to coercive treatment, we can argue morally, is it a good thing? That's something permissible for us to detain another human being. I mean, the lawyers can argue, is it legal to do that? But today we are looking at the moral level. It's something acceptable, something good to detain a human being, whether they've got a mental illness or not. And we're going to spend a lot of time on autonomy to explore this argument. And I must just define what autonomy is, what people have said about it. That individual autonomy is an idea that is generally understood to refer to the capacity to be one's own person, to live one's life according to reasons and motives that are taken as one's own and not the product of manipulative or distorting external forces. So we should presume that people with mental illness have autonomy, they are autonomous. And coercive treatment is the treatment of people with mental illness against their objection to treatment. And as I've mentioned, it has been termed coercive treatment. And in South Africa, it is legal. There are arguments for coercive treatment. I've already put mine, that it preserves autonomy. Right enough, you lose autonomy in the short term as they're taking you to Stakeford Hospital, but once you recover, you retain, or you become autonomous in many other decisions. But there are other utilitarian arguments, moral arguments, because, and in terms of utilitarianism, we want to, morally, we want to minimize bad in life and maximize good. We want good things to be, want all our efforts to be put to make life good, happy. So what are the arguments? Why would forced treatment maximize good? It's been argued that we may have to admit these patients against their will to preserve the physical and their mental integrity. And secondly, the consequences of antreated psychosis, especially schizophrenia, sometimes even antreated depression, the episodes get worse with each subsequent episode and even more difficult to treat. There's decline in cognitive function, especially after the first 2 years of the first psychotic episode. It's important that we intervene early to preserve the cognitive function. I mean, if we may have to treat to preserve the dignity of the person. And also there's cost of untreated mental illness to the person and to their community. So what are the objections to coercive treatment? A lot of objections have been forwarded. I'm going to discuss 3 today. There's been objections in what I will describe a bit later in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. There's been objections that have been raised in a recent High Court judgment in Pretoria. And also there's a lot of papers written about objections raised by people with lived experiences. Starting with the CRPD, the Convention the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This is a work that was ratified by South Africa. The work of the United Nations. It was ratified by South Africa in 2007, and it has been interpreted subsequently to that. It's quite condensed when you read it, but there's been subsequent interpretations by the United Nations. And one of the interpretations, they pertain to Article 12 of the CRPD. And Steinert summarizes it. Steinert starts with that the Article 12, it recognizes persons as having legal capacity and in all aspects of life, and they should be treated on equal basis, including those with mental illness. That's Steinert's interpretation. Therefore, the medical necessity doctrine and the best interest doctrine are denied. Coercive treatment is linked to torture with a demand for abolishment of any coercive treatment. With just these few lines that I've taken from that objection, you can see that if it's a United Nations document, South Africa has ratified it, there is going to be, and if South Africa has ratified it, it is expected that South Africa should implement it, and there's therefore they're going to pressure on us to actually implement it and abolish the coercive treatment. Steinert further quotes and says that it is recommended that national policies should ban any coercive treatment and that all laws or policies related to substitute decision-making should be replaced with supported decision-making options. Now, the supported decision-making process, and they've done it in the other countries, the status in Germany, where efforts are put to go towards supported decision-making. And there's even papers written on it. I find it quite an involved process that will be quite labor-intensive to do. But maybe morality and law should not be based on convenience. Maybe I'm talking from a convenience. The second objection that has been raised, so the first one is the fact that we have to deal with United Nations. They want us to implement and stop coercive treatment. Maybe we may have to participate. But the second one is that was came out of the High Court judgment in Pretoria this year. Not a full objection, but it nudges us to move that direction, to do something. It was a case brought by Makana People Center against the Minister of Health and the 9 MECs. The Makana People Center is from Grahamstown, and they raised 3 issues were contested. I won't give you the whole debate, but the 3 issues were contested. They said, in the process of making a person an involuntary mental health care user, that is coercive treatment, there is no automatic independent review of detention under this involuntary mental health care user. In fact, the judge even in his judgment said it takes 70 days for any court to make an opinion, give a judgment, make an order. One is admitted. As I said earlier on, you get admitted, you go to hospital, you start your 72-hour observation. After 72-hour observation, the hospital, you get transferred to Steekfontein. Then the hospital takes all that paperwork to the review board, and they've got 10 days to do that. And then the review board has 30 days to say, discharge that person or keep. So that is already 40 days. And if the review board decides to keep you, then the review board will send that to High Court, and High Court has got another 30 days. So it's only on day 70 maximum that the judge in High Court can say this admission was wrong or this admission was correct. So in that process, the judge felt there's no independent process. I think no independent review. And I think when he said no independent review, although he didn't put it in words, he meant a judicial review, because there are 2 healthcare workers at the beginning of 72 hours, 2 healthcare workers at the end of 72 hours. The person was admitted by healthcare workers in the mental health care establishment. So there's a lot of review by doctors, but there's no judicial review. He further says, it don't belong, it's just 3 or 4 issues that were contested. They further argue that Section 34 and Section 36 of the Mental Health Care Act do not provide the review board and the High Court with discretion to examine the mental health care user who is subject of the review proceedings. So in that process, even though papers are being passed, the law doesn't allow the review board to call the patient on the spot without an objection, or the judge to call the patient on the spot without an objection. In fact, I've never heard of that. The only time the review board calls for a review process is if there's someone who's appealing their admission. Then the third one they raised is the independence of the review boards. These review boards, they fall under the Provincial Department of Health, and they get funded by the Provincial Department of Health. And that is a bit of a problem, because the review board is sort of dependent on the MEC of Health of a province. And to me, I think that contributed to the life testimony problem, because if the review board were independent, they would not have allowed the discharge without a proper process being followed. So you are hearing me talking about Makana people. Who are they? I don't know them myself. I hope they are not here online, or if they are online, they'll ask questions. When I Googled them, they realized they were established in 2020. And me being big-headed, I asked that they use the reference life estimated throughout their papers, but they never contacted us. Or you may say, then I'm like our Minister of Police. Say, shut up, Makana people. Maybe not, because the judge didn't think like I'm thinking. So what did the judge say in High Court this year? The scheme for the involuntary detention of mental health care user created under Section 33 to 34 of the Mental Health Care Act is declared to be inconsistent with the Constitution and therefore invalid, to the extent that it does not provide for automatic independent review prior to or immediately following the initial detention of a person involuntarily detained under Mental Care Act. You can see that the first issue contested, the Makana people won there. The second one says, in terms of section 34 and 36 of the Mental Care Act, the review board and the court respectively may, in their discretion, examine the mental care user who's subject of the review proceedings. So they agree with the Makana people on that one as well. And on the third one was about in the issue of the independence of the review board. They agreed with Makana people. I also agree with the judge of this one, because I think it would do better if the review board would be independent. And actually, the judge had a cost order against the Minister of Health and the 9 MECs. Usually, when the judge passes a cost order, probably they say the Minister of Health should have just realized that this is something that doesn't need any litigation. It should have just been settled and in the way he is charged. But obviously, this was a constitutional matter. It will still be referred to the Constitutional Court, who will then, I'm using lay terms, confirm the judgment or not confirm it. Of course, unless any of us are the public protector, we'll wait for the Constitutional Court to decide. But I do have, and not just me and my colleagues, we do have concerns because we think that this is going to limit access to care if there's going to be a judicial review of each and every admission. There's already not enough doctors to process patients. I wonder how many legal practitioners will have to process the patient. And obviously, the judge didn't explain what automatic review is. I mean, if it's outside the judiciary, maybe it could be easier and better. The third objection that I'm going to raise today is that of the lived experiences of people with mental illness. People with mental illness have objected to this forced treatment throughout the world. There's a lot of publications, but I found one that was balanced, where, and that is the article that I found, where actually the people with lived experiences, they gave two opinions that I've summarized. One, they felt that the subjective experience of compulsory treatment of physical restraint during inpatient care, they recall it as traumatic. Or that's on one side. But others felt that in other cases, hospitalization can bring a much sought after sense of safety and relief, particularly during acute psychosis. Remembering that, especially in the context of South Africa, if you've got a mental illness and you're wandering in the streets, so we've had experiences where people have been killed, being accused of practicing witchcraft when they've got mental illness. So letting the person to wander in the streets and not being treated could also pose a risk to the person with mental illness. So is psychiatry at a crossroads with ethics and law, or is it in interchange? I think we're in an interchange. I'm hopeful that even if the Constitutional Court finds in favor, agrees with the Pretoria High Court judgment, we'll be able to find a way that will still allow us to continue with ethical admission of patients, whether they are voluntary, involuntary, or assisted mental health care users. In conclusion, ethics of coercive treatment are a subject of continued debate, as you see. It's not just a South African problem, it's an international problem. And for Africa, actually wonder if it would actually work to not have coercive treatment. I've spoken to psychiatrists in some countries where there's 1 or 2 psychiatrists for the whole country. I also don't think it has worked well for the first world either. Maybe I'm speaking from position of jealousy, but I've been to California, see people in the streets in the US who are neglected, poorly cared for, but they are not being treated or being put to hospital. And I must also emphasize that the challenge the constitutionality of the Mental Health Act does not object to coercive treatment per se. It objects to the manner in which we are doing it. And I think on that score, there is room for improvement. We could find ways of improving. We are still getting off lightly for now, but we still have to deal with the process that we follow, and we still have to deal with the CRPD, how we align our Mental Health Act with CRPD. I saw a paper published by several authors, but it included Melvin Freeman and Sfiso Phakathi, and they were sort of arguing against us following the CRPD, and I mentioned their names because they are from the National Department of Health. So I think we've got a long way before we find that alignment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Talatala. It went so quickly. I was still enjoying the talk and wanted to hear more about.
Sorry, it's ethics. It's ethics. What we are talking on ethics mustn't take you too long. People will fall drowsy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I see we've got 2 questions at the moment. I know you touched on it. You know, when you talk about the admissions, and that we should not. It's not everybody who should be admitted directly. If there's a suspicion that they are not able to take care of themselves. From time to time, one does receive calls to say, I've got a neighbor, I've got a son, I've got someone in the church who's misbehaving. Can you arrange for us to get him straight to Sterkfontein Hospital? What would you say to that?
I would be in trouble if we do that. No one should go straight to a facility like Sterkfontein or let me not mention others in case I get them wrong, different provinces, but to a dedicated psychiatric facility. You should not go directly. Firstly, just besides the legalities of it, just from a medical point of view, when a patient goes to casualty, the doctors at casualty are not familiar with physical illness presenting with psychiatric signs and symptoms. They automatically think that when you're aggressive, you must be having schizophrenia. You'll be amazed, Abila, how many times doctors have thought that I've got special powers. The fact that I just thought this patient probably has got something in the brain, you do a scan, and it's not a psychiatric patient, and you do a scan and find a tumor. So it is important that they don't go directly. They first spend that 72 hours observation to be evaluated, to have all the necessary blood tests. And sometimes, apart from the medical stuff, sometimes people with mental illness, they go to admitted in that 72 hours, they get medication, they get better, they can consent. There's no longer a need now to send them to a psychiatric facility. You can treat them as voluntary mental health care users at Dr. SK Matsige or wherever they are, or at district hospital.
Yeah, no, thanks for that response. So I think it is important that we educate the public, because sometimes people they think that the someone's got mental illness, they just need to be assisted to get straight to a psychiatric hospital, as you've just explained. Now, you mentioned these facilities, which are private facilities. Now, here's a question from Dr. Zintashozi. Is it ethically acceptable to admit a patient as an involuntary in a facility where they have to pay for the facilities used to themselves? I know you've just said that you're challenging the clinic's management to open up Solomon Sticks Morewa for involuntary admissions. So those patients, whether they public, private, I'm not sure. You didn't make a distinction as to whether they should be also private facility or just a public. But this particular one, clearly they say it's a private patient, and they didn't choose to go there. It's an involuntary admission. Should they pay for themselves?
Yes, I'm going to start with you, Talatala. No, you are running away from my pressure. I want private involuntary mental health care user at Solomon Sticks.
Okay.
not the government ones.
Okay.
Actually, the person is right. It's actually a practice that is done in Gauteng, I've actually thought about it with difficulty for a long time. The one side of the argument, and I'll bring the two together, is one may say, why must you pay for yourself if you didn't want to be in that hospital? If you didn't want to be in the hospital, the state should pay for itself. It gets more difficult if I'm going to pay cash for myself. But let's take the one who's on medical aid. Even the one who's going to the state, the community is paying for him. They're not paying for themselves. So it's paid for by the state. We are all paying for him to be at stake for them. The one who's going to go to Solomon Sticks, or for now is going to Portview, the members of the scheme. So it's not a direct cost to him because it's not on the admission is not on your savings. It comes from the risk pool. So the members of a scheme have agreed to pay for any of their members if they were to have this kind of illness, even if that person doesn't agree. So no one, both the scheme members and the state patients are not paying for themselves. The community is paying for them. It gets tricky if I were to then say, no, you must pay for yourself cash. I doubt you'll be admitted. If you say I don't be admitted, I must pay for myself cash. That probably won't happen because you then not put the deposit to the hospital. But I must say, if I were to be, and I'm not talking badly of the state hospitals, but if I were to be, have a mental illness and need involuntary care, I would still prefer personally to be admitted in a private facility in the current state of our facilities, even if I paid for myself. So I think the argument that can be put by those who are licensing private facilities to offer involuntary mental care is that actually the patients themselves, they are not paying for it. It's the scheme, is the members of the scheme, called scheme Stokvel. It's the Stokvel that has agreed to that. And if you're a member of a Stokvel and you don't want this to happen, you should raise it and object to your scheme so that they change their minds.
Okay. Yeah, well, maybe we'll talk maybe later more about maybe the state of public hospitals, because you've just uttered a statement that you preference that you would want patients to be admitted in a private facility rather than a public facility as involuntary because of the state of public hospitals at the moment.
Indeed, sorry, I'll just add, and as I said, I'm not talking badly of them, but they are full. That's the first problem. I think that's why Gauteng went that route. I was not paying the decision, but they are full. Then it means even if what will eventually end up happening is that you will wait in a private facility, waiting for a bed to stay for day. So you still be treated against your will in a facility that is not even prepared for it. You see, it's better than we just have a private one that is designed for it, so that you can do the work.
Yeah, I hear you. Dr. Snyman wants to know, do you think it is ethically acceptable to admit a psychotic patient in a facility like a hospital ward where the environment is not entirely suitable for them? That is, you've got kids in an adult ward without proper care and where kids are not catered for primarily. Should they not be seen in a proper facility from the word go? Suppose this is say that you need to have separate facilities for children, pediatric psychiatric cases.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak for everyone. Let's just talk about the right things. Obviously, children should be separated from adults. I'm just talking now, irrespective of the diagnosis. I mean, pediatric ward cannot be mixed with adult medical wards. But when it comes to psychiatry, if the psychiatric diagnosis is established, that person should go to a psychiatric facility. Obviously, unless there are no beds anyway, then you do whatever you can do. So if the psychiatric diagnosis is established, the patient should go. Where it becomes controversial, and I fight with my colleagues, is a confused person. Because the confused person can be confused because of delirium, and a psychiatric facility is not suitable for delirium, don't have the facilities to manage whatever illness is causing that. So I think each patient must be nursed in the proper, appropriate bed.
Okay. Maybe going back, I know you've alluded to this. Is there a need for more education for general physicians to understand psychiatric illness, and also to be, because you find that there is a tendency to want to, even vice versa, that psychiatrists may not want to admit patients who may be purely having a mental illness in a psychiatric ward, or the reluctance of the physicians to see this patient and say, this is your patient. How do we navigate that so to make sure that we don't compromise patient care?
You see, I think I did the talk last year on physical illness and mental illness. You've got physical illness and mental illness, two extremes when they are pure, but at some stage they overlap. That's the gray area that makes the psychiatrists and physicians to fight, both in private and public. This one, you'll be surprised, even in private, it happens. But I think that is an area of consultation as in psychiatry, where the two teams should talk about the patient. Because even if the patient has got an infection, but if behavioral is so bad, sometimes we have to compromise and go and nurse the patient in a psychiatric ward. But that patient is going to need a lot of support from the physicians to deal with the underlying problem that is causing the behavioral problem. So I think there should be communication between the two treating teams. I know the personalities and the difficulties, and all of us being well educated may want to protect our own terrain, but that area of overlap, we need to manage it together. In fact, it's becoming more and more obvious that psychiatric illness is actually a medical condition.
Thank you. Yes, one of your colleagues here, Dr. Moloto. In view of the epidemic of substance abuse and dependence, particularly opioid, examples like Nyaupe and other stimulants, crystal methylate, is it ethical for the Department of Health to defer this health issue to be managed by the social department?
No, the Moloto wants me to be arrested by my superiors. No, I'm joking. No. I've got my own thoughts about it, but just for the benefit of everyone in the meeting. At the moment, the way things are in South Africa is that substance abuse is managed by the social development, and psychiatric, unless there's dual diagnosis, then can go to the Department of Health and a psychiatrist. I think the thinking around it is that substance abuse, the underlying causes of substance abuse are actually social issues. You need a lot of social interventions to deal with substance abuse in the community before it even complicates. I think that's the idea where they have. My personal preference, I would move it to health and just beef up health with more social workers, because we are used to a big component of it is going to come to us anyway. We're going to treat the withdrawal, and there's a lot of research on addiction and all of that. So if I was running the government, I'll move it to health. But I understand where they come from, why they've separated the two. They are emphasizing the social determinants of substance abuse, and they want to deal with those, but they are not. But anyway.
Yeah. So, but I say what you spoke about, the dual diagnosis should be a more pragmatic approach of managing maybe social, the substance abuse disorders predisposing as mental illness. Yeah, then there's Dr. Van der Vos, who's one of our regulars, says, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. You won't see this one said to me directly, Dr. Talatala and Dr. Pila. And Musabanda says, excellent presentation, Dr. Talatala. Body from psychiatry, patients with MDR, TB, COVID, and other communicable diseases are treated against their will. Do their negative lived experiences change their priority of treating them?
I've not actually looked at that one. I mean, even during COVID-19, remember those people who were taken to the ranch in Lipobo after when they were coming back from China. I've actually not looked at the law does allow that during the COVID-19, but even for TB being a communicable disease, but I don't know how they feel about it.
Okay. Dr. Celeste Balo, is it not the case that the Mental Health Act regulations indicate that involuntary mental health care users should be exempted from, okay, I think going back to that question that we discussed, but is that the case that it says, but we talk about in the private sector, that it says that they should not be they should not be billed for the admissions in the private sector. Is it covered in the bill? I do not, in the Act, I do not recall it.
No,
It's not in voluntary cases.
Yeah, it's not in the Act, but it's what I argued earlier on, in the sense that I think the people in Gauteng, probably government and psychiatrists, they thought about this and they say, you are not billing the patient, you are billing the scheme. And the members of the scheme have agreed to fund this through the risk. It's not coming out of their savings. So it is the person's community of medical aid members that is actually funding this care.
Yeah, the thing is, we don't know who's going to be needing involuntary admission. It may be me, maybe you tomorrow. So if we are covered under the medical aid, so we might as well have that part of our medical aid contributions.
I doubt if it is covered to call a meeting and say to its members, do you want us to stop paying for it? I doubt people will say, yes, stop, because you don't know if it will be used tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. And one of our board members, Dr. Talatala, is asking the question, do you have a working relationship with traditional healers, especially when you treat psychiatric patients, as most of them believe they are bewitched? I think it's a broad study there in terms of traditional medicine and psychiatry and the impact of one on the other.
That's a topic for another day. It's a big topic on its own. I don't have personal working relationships myself, but when patients want to go and consult, that's something we always, together with the patient, agree on. And I've had patients from who are attending a traditional healer being sent to me to look after them. But it's not an area that I personally explored. There are psychiatrists with an interest in it, and there is an overlap with spiritual calling and patient and our patient's symptoms.
Yeah, maybe speaking broad on spiritual calling, whether it's a traditional healers or Christianity or other faiths, Muslim, Hindu, what is the thinking currently in terms of a joint management between the psychiatrists and other faith healers?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's not just traditional healers, it's everyone, including Christians and all religions. It's better to, for the benefit of the patient, it's better to work, that we all collaborate and work together. But whether we've got capacity to do it, that's something else. Yeah. But by the way, having said that, I once gave a talk in East Africa, and my colleagues were not impressed by these ideas that I'm expressing here. They were of the view that we should focus on the medical treatment of the patient. Is their problem whether they go to a traditional healer or not, because they felt that the traditional healers or the healers are fake and they do more harm to the patient. But that was the opinion of that meeting.
Okay, in Africa.
I was surprised because I thought I was surprised. It was not in Europe. I'm sure in Europe I would have got more respect.
Yeah, no. I thought there was much written about that in terms of faith healers and psychiatry, the convergence somewhere.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to say. But I just want to go to it because of our topic today. It is.
Yeah.
It is definitely. It
okay.
is. There's lots. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Dr. Mtebu Mongane Mtebu, how do we ethically and morally handle a psychotic colleague who knows how to manipulate the system when it suits them? Well, I think it comes from a lived experience that it has happened to him. Not that he's the one, but a colleague.
No, I must mention this. But people mustn't run away. They can still come and consult me. But the most difficult patients are doctors. Because you see, a patient has never seen any mini mental state examination. So when I'm asking those questions, they're ticking. The patients don't know, lay people don't know what I'm doing. But the doctors, they know as you ask questions. So they are most difficult, even before they become psychotic. To deal with suicide amongst healthcare workers is very difficult because they know my thinking. Once I'm asking about suicide, probably I'm going to admit you in hospital. So they are very difficult. I've treated even psychotic colleagues, very difficult. The other problem is that us as the healthcare system, we tend not to be as firm as we would be to a lay person. I mean, don't want if there to the SK Matsiga, a doctor comes out running to the gate, the security guards will be scared to handle that person, even nurses. And yet, if it was a lay person, they could have just stopped the person because they'll think that this is Dr. Talatala, must be respected. So they are very difficult. So I think it's better to refer them to an experienced psychiatrist who is used to working with colleagues, especially if they are psychotic, and refer to them to treat them. There will always be errors here and there, but the more years you spend in the field, the more ability you acquire to deal with them. But I must say they are difficult. Yeah. Apart from them, also people who think they've got money, artists and everyone. Yes. No, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, it must be difficult, yes, yeah. And Dr. Doba comes back and she wants to know, in terms of life as a dementia, are there any ethical issues that you learned out of the life as dementia saga? We know that the cases are still ongoing. We're still having a inquest hearings.
Yeah,
my internet is unstable.
No, I can hear you very well.
Did you get me?
Yes, I got you. Hoping everyone, can you hear me? Because I hear you very well.
No, I got the message that my internet is unstable.
No, I hear you.
Okay,
I got you.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's lots of lessons from life testimony, especially ethical lessons. But since I assume there's mostly doctors here, one that I fought for at the time when I was dealing with the colleagues at life testimony, as well as the one I think we should learn is the importance of us keeping to our professional ethics and our clinical decisions. The managers, the medical aides, the hospital groups, including clinics, or the government officials, they put pressure on us to take steps that are not in agreement with the known clinical practices. And it will be unethical, especially if there's an adverse event. I mean, there is no reason why anyone in this country can discharge patients in big numbers without consulting and working with the Society of Psychiatrists. I think that's quite important. This other lesson, I won't mention all of them. The other lesson that I thought was important, and we practice this, it is important of us, one, belonging to professional bodies. So that was Society of Psychiatrists, SAMA, whatever you prefer. But those bodies must also stand for patient rights, especially the human rights. There's lots of lessons, but those two, to me, they come to my head quite fast.
Okay.
This time I didn't hear you if you're talking.
No. See, I switched off. My bandwidth is very low, and I was struggling to hear you myself. So that's why I switched off my video, because I don't know if it will help me to be much clearer. Yeah, I'll try again just to open my video. There's a question, because I'm sure that I missed part of what you were saying, but it's okay. I hope the colleagues heard you when you were talking. There's a question about Dr. Mvuyiso Ganzo. How do we handle family who want to perform a ritual in the ward for their loved one who is admitted to 72 hours? Is it comparable to prayer that is allowed?
I would leave that to the hospital, but in my hospital, especially the first 2 hours, I would not allow that. I would not even allow the ritual, because it can just, to me, but that's my preference, it would just cause more confusion, not only to the affected patient, but to other patients in the ward. Unless I had, unless the patient they are the only patients in the ward, maybe that may be acceptable. Remember, in the same 2 hour observation, there'll be other patients who are also very ill. So I will not allow, I'll be unhappy to have any prayers being done in the ward, especially if there are people who are quite unstable.
Can I venture outside of psychiatry and just ask, when some places where patients demise, and then there are family members who want to come, they say what they want to come and take the spirit of the deceased, and they want to come to have prayers in the ward. What's your attitude? I've been confronted with this, and I battled to know how to handle such a situation?
Well, I've seen hospitals allowing it, especially the public service. I mean, I've not worked in a ward where there's lots of mortality now that I'm older. But in my younger days in Durban, they used to let the families come. I think to be, especially if there's no disruption, the reason I'm objecting to prayers in the 72 hours of patients, because patients to be the behavioral problems will be acute. In fact, preferably we should not even have visitors going into the ward, because actually, what about the dignity of the patients being seen by other people? So we should not have visitors there. But if it's a stable medical ward and they want to exercise, because the family will be affected in terms of grief now, if they don't do all their rituals, you could end up with problems of grief in the family for those who are surviving.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, no, thanks. We seem to have covered quite a lot. So thank you very much for this presentation and the discussion that we've had, and also quite an interactive session that we've had from colleagues who were part of this discussion, and quite a number of them still logged in, quite a high number. I'm going to ask if there are no further questions, colleagues, that we then proceed and call this question. I'm going to just somebody say thank you very much. Dr. Kenoshi is here, who's the Chief of Operations, to do a closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bila, and good evening. Good evening, colleagues. I must say I've been educated today, and thanks to our guest tonight, Dr. Talatala. We know Dr. Tala, and congratulations, Dr. Tala, on your recent appointment as head of psychiatry in Krisani Bara Academic Hospital. I think that's a very great recognition of your expertise, your excellence, and your experience in psychiatry. We are glad that you and I have spoken a lot, touched by your passion for mental health care users. I think you've empathic towards your patients, and a big advocate of your patients as well. And I think that's quite impressive. Who can forget your very emotional account of the Life Acidity saga in the Museneke arbitration hearings in 2017? I mean, that was a very good sign of someone who is really passionate about mental health care users. I think your talk today gave us a lot of information, especially about involuntary admissions, but also I think you gave us good advice. It was quite stimulating. It stimulated the interest that we should all have as practitioners, GP specialists, and even healthcare managers like me and Dr. Bila, who often have to make decisions about around the mental health care patients, on dealing with how to deal with mental health care patients. I know I've been a GP before, in clinical medicine before, and I know how at times it can be difficult to be confronted with a patient who's mentally disturbed and is brought in, and most of the time you get frustrated because you don't know what to do or how to do it initially. Some doctors tend to shun away from patients with mental health care. And I'm glad you agreed to us to come and talk to us tonight during this mental health care month on doctors who are here who would have more confidence in actually contributing to the betterment of our mental health care patients whenever we are confronted with a situation. Thank you very much for your informative talk, Doctor. But maybe I should thank the people who took their time, available time to log in tonight. I think I saw at one stage 249 people who had logged in. Continue to host these seminars, these webinars, for as long as you log in. So if you continue to log in, I think we will continue to host the seminars, the free seminar, the webinars, by the way, unlike with other suppliers who, some of them charge a fee. We must thank the board of clinics, and the group executive, the CEO, Dr. Mazeke, and the Expo, for continuing to fund these webinars, so that they can contribute to improvement of the wealth of knowledge around various topics. You are invited yourselves to nominate people who could come and give us talks in future weeks, these weekly webinars, or you can volunteer yourselves to come and give us a talk. Any topic of your choice. Kamagelo Bosakwe in the background doing the technical work. Thanks very much, Dr. Bila. Let me hand over to you to do the closing.
No, thanks, Dr. Kinashi. We actually have come to the end of the presentation and just want to thank everyone for being here. Let's meet again next week as we continue with our discussions on mental health awareness. And have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.